Hello guys, welcome back to Eerie Covenant. I just want to say before I start, Lady Blind Wolf, thank you for your comment, and I believe you're a newfound friend of mine. So I wanted to give her a little shout out, and if you haven't seen her videos, go check her out. So this is going to be Witch History Part 2, about the Malleus Maleficarum and the Burning Times. The Burning Times was an awful part of witch history, and not only for our sisters and brothers hung or burned at the stake, but for many innocent people. From the 14th to the 16th century, an estimated of 40 to 50,000 people were killed alone for witchcraft in Germany, France, England, and Italy. In 1692, it hit New England, or what we know as America, and it became the Salem witch trials. Sorry, I had like a brain fog there. Alright. Before this, Europe had been executing witches for years. What and who were responsible? And how did this happen? In the Bible, Exodus 22 verse 18 says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." Back then, Christians believed in the Word of God and lived by it daily. But was this small verse the only thing responsible for the slaughter of so many innocent people? No, not entirely. There is a book that I despise, and I find it quite comical at some points. The Malleus Maleficarum, also known as the Hammer of Witches or the Witch Hunter's Bible. As the Catholic and Christian churches arose in power, they did not tolerate heresy and began to punish in 1484. The punishment was death for witchcraft. This is a bit of a backstory to the Malleus Maleficarum. In 1486, the Witch Hunter's Bible was written to identify, find, and kill witches more easily and give them more tangible evidence of witchcraft and people performing witchcraft, because the church needed evidence to try people. In this book, there are rules how to judge cases and torture for confessions and rule out witches. In this book, the witch's mark or teats were mentioned, making it a popular way to identify witches, involving an inspection of the body. I don't have any teats, but I do have birthmarks. But this inspection included shaving all the body hair, including the private area, and I mention this because how humiliating that must have been. How degrading and evil alone was that. Not only were witches tortured and killed, but they also had to lose their dignity. The idea of witches' teats were how they believed witches fed their familiars. They would test the mark, birthmark, or what they thought was a witch's teat, by piercing it with a needle. If pain was felt or it bled, they were not a witch. If no pain was felt and no blood came out, then this was unnatural to them, so they must have been a witch. Another way they identified witches from this book was to swim a witch, or they would tie the witch up and throw or dunk her in water, like a river or a lake or something. If she floated, she was a witch. If she sunk or drowned, then she was innocent. I don't know how that made sense to them, but I mean, whatever. The next part in this book I want to talk about is how they extracted confessions. Torturing a witch for a confession was justified because witchcraft was seen as a crime against the church. There were many forms of torture endured through this, excruciating means of torture. They must have been unbearable. They would hang one a few feet from the ground with their arms shackled to a wall behind their backs, making their shoulders and arms hold the weight, sometimes pulling them from the sockets or breaking their arms. And one moment. Okay, sorry, had to pause a moment. The heretic's fork was pressed under the accused's chin, right here, and then against their chest here, with pointed prongs on each end. Ow. And another one, the pear, or the pear of anguish, or the choke pear. This one always kind of traumatized me. I couldn't imagine enduring the pear of anguish. But it was a device mainly for women. But it was inserted into a cavity and then twisted open on all sides to stretch the cavities open further, causing things to tear. Ow. It would also be used in the mouth for men, or also women, I'm sure, and it would be inserted and twisted open to break one's jaw. The thumb screw. It sounds exactly like what it is, but it's a simple vise with protruding studs on the surface. The victim's thumbs, fingers, and toes were placed into them and slowly crushed. These are just a few of the torture devices that they would use to extract a confession. I picked the ones that I probably would not want, even though they all sound really awful. But the witch hunts lasted until the 1700s. Now this lovely book, and I'm being sarcastic, The Hammer of Witches, was written by the scumbag, Catholic clergyman Heinrich Kramer. Sold as a bestseller second to the Bible for 200 years. I just don't get it. I give up on humanity. This book's influence was strong over cultures for several centuries, later used by the royal courts during the Renaissance, and contributed to the brutal witch trials in the 16th and 17th century. This gave enemies a chance to point the finger at you. If you're a farmer and your goat died, you could point the finger at your neighbors and say they killed my goat through witchcraft. If you were an old lady or a widow, you could be blamed for being a witch. If you had too much money and you were a single woman, you could be a witch. You had to walk on eggshells and Bible thump to be safe, and even then you were not safe. Back then, they also believed women were more susceptible to turn to the devil and were naturally more lustful. I'm not even going to give my opinion about that. They believed women also could have sexual relations with the devil, and that would be why they chose the devil's side, or that women were like Eve and wanted knowledge, so they would go and get it through the devil. Women, apparently to them, sought out things that they were not supposed to seek out. Their outlook on women then was completely heinous. But anyway, also written in The Hammer of Witches was everything I just said. So, this guy was so sexist. This is how much influence that this book had over society then, though. It goes to show you how crazy religious beliefs can get. No other figure in history has been as feared and despised as the witch. And I really think that's a sad fact. Even now we are feared and hated by religious communities. But we were not always seen as evil in the beginning of time. Witches have been around since the beginning of time in community. In part 3, we're going to discuss this and how the ancient ones practiced and their history before the religious panic and the religious craze hit Europe and then America. I hope you enjoyed this video, and it is so important to remember our history. My heart really goes out to all the victims in the burning times and anyone victimized today just for being a witch. But us witches must stick together. We must claim our power and our right to believe in what we want. And as always, guys, with love and light from Erie Covenant.